When you're finally ready to upgrade the low end of a home or project studio, the decision about a subwoofer can feel surprisingly heavy. You've probably watched a dozen videos promising instant cinematic bass, and you've read spec sheets that list power and driver size like they're the only things that matter. The risk is ending up with a box that either overwhelms a modest room or sits unnoticed because it's not tuned right. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and I'm going to walk through exactly what that looks like in a real-world setup so you can decide whether the Neumann KH750 is the right fit for you. First off, let's talk about the kind of environment where the KH750 starts to make sense. The unit carries a 256-watt Class D amp and a 10-inch driver, which means it can push the bottom end down well into the sub-20 Hz region enough to make a kick drum feel like it's hitting a floor rather than just a thump. In a medium-sized treated room, say about 1,512 feet with some acoustic panels, I've found that positioning the sub about a foot away from a wall and then pulling it a few inches forward after a quick bass trap test, playing a low-frequency sine and listening for boominess, gives a surprisingly clean foundation. The low frequencies stay tight enough that they don't muddy the mids from the main monitors, which is exactly what you want when you're mixing electronic music or editing film soundtracks that rely on precise low-end cues. Now, who should actually consider spending on this Neumann model? If you're a professional mixing engineer, a composer who regularly works with orchestral or electronic elements, or a content creator who needs to hear those sub-bass details for accurate translation to consumer playback systems, the extra power and driver size are justified. You'll also benefit if you already own high-quality near-field monitors that are flat in the mid-range. The sub will fill the gap without forcing you to compromise on overall tonal balance. On the flip side, if you're a bedroom producer who mostly works with vocal-centric pop or acoustic folk, or you have a very small room without proper bass trapping, the KH750 can become more of a headache than a help. You'll likely need to spend additional time dialing in the crossover and phase settings, and you may end up with a room-filling boom that masks the nuances you're trying to hear. In practical terms, the strengths of the KH750 show up once you get past the initial placement. The built-in DSP offers a simple crossover knob that lets you set the point anywhere between 30 and 80 Hz, which is helpful if you're pairing it with monitors that already dip into the low mids. The phase switch is another lifesaver. Flipping it can instantly tighten the bass response when the sub and monitors are not perfectly aligned in distance from your listening spot. Because the amp is fully powered, you won't have to worry about external power supplies or nasty hums that sometimes creep in with cheaper units. The 10-inch driver, while not as large as a 12-inch studio staple, actually delivers a quicker transient response, meaning kicks and bass synth plucks retain their attack instead of sounding like a slow, rolling wave. That said, the weaknesses are equally important to flag. The cabinet is fairly heavy, around 30 pounds, so moving it for a different room or a client's space takes a bit of effort and may require a dolly or two strong hands. The front grille is removable but not magnetically sealed, which means you have to be careful when swapping it out. The clips can become loose after repeated handling. Another practical trade-off is the lack of a built-in SPL meter, something that many competing subwoofers provide to help you hit a target level without a separate analyzer. Without that, you'll need a separate measurement tool or rely on your ears, which can be tricky if you're not accustomed to judging sub-bass in decibels. Finally, the price point places it in the upper mid-range, so if you're on a tight budget you might get more bang for your buck from a smaller, less powerful unit and allocate the savings toward room treatment instead. Wrapping up, the Neumann KH750 is essentially a specialist's tool. It shines when you have a room that can handle its power, you have the time to tune it properly, and you need that deep, articulate bass for critical listening. If you're still on the fence because you're worried about overkill or the extra effort of setup, think about